Alright, what's going on, guys, and welcome back. So perhaps this was just naivety or maybe hopeful thinking, but I really thought we were past the point of people trashing on every major monster taming release and stating that said game is either a Pokemon clone or tries to be Pokemon or whatever. Today we're going to be discussing what I'm sure a lot of you have already seen circulating, and sure, it's died down a little bit because time has passed since the release, but that's the influx in people who clearly haven't played Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince, making disparaging remarks about its systems or its quality based on either their preconceived notions of what a game should be based on their experience with Pokemon, or simply ignorance to the fact that Dragon Quest games and subsequently the systems present within DQM have existed during and even before the Pokemon era. I'm definitely no expert when it comes to Dragon Quest as a series, but today I do want to at least educate people a little bit on what Dragon Quest Monsters is and dive into what I think are some of the reasons behind the negative reception from a certain corner of the internet. That being said, let's dive in. Okay, so first of all, I want to make this very clear. This isn't a video attacking people who don't like this game. You're allowed not to like something. That makes total sense. This is more so a discussion about some people who either haven't played it or only played for an hour and made an entire review about it only to actually play it later and realize that they perpetuated many falsehoods about the title. I don't want to get into any of the creators or game journalists in specific that I've seen this from, but there have been a few notable cases like this where people will just blindly follow whatever their favorite content creator says about the game if it suits a particular narrative that they're looking for. Tropes like the game not having any more complexity than Pokemon, or the game being a no-brain auto-battler, or saying the game's trying to copy Pokemon are common sentiments I've seen not only from certain content creators, but also their followers. Now, these points are just blatantly untrue. Dragon Quest Monsters features a highly complex battle system where you can literally fuse any monsters together to create new ones. Battles are in a 4-on-4 setting with multiple traits, way more than 4 moves per monster, various booster abilities, and more. The amount of complexity present within this game is nothing to scoff at, and anyone who says otherwise hasn't played it, or at least hasn't played it enough to actually dive into the mechanics beyond the first level of the game. As someone who's dabbled in competitive Pokemon a little bit back in Generation 6, and I even used to learn about the meta and stuff in prior generations but never actually participated. But anyways, the fact of the matter is this game does have more complexity than Pokemon. But even then, it doesn't really matter which one you think is more complex. The fact of the matter is that it does have complexity, and there's a high skill ceiling. You can give direct orders to your monsters in any situations except the Colosseums, and the fact that people fail to mention this is indicative of their ignorance. As far as copying Pokemon is concerned, this is such a tired argument that's generally levied by hardcore Pokemon fans, particularly the flavor that gets super defensive whenever a new monster taming game comes out, even if we're talking about indie games. I've watched these types of fans over the years disparage and ridicule game with much lower budgets than Pokemon titles, even solo dev games, whilst acting as apologists for any of the issues when it comes to their beloved franchise. This is by no means every Pokemon fan, nor does the majority, but there is a very loud subsect of the Pokemon community that's like this. Whether or not this is in response to the equally loud and just as obnoxious sect that takes their criticisms to the point of attacking people directly is besides the point, because ultimately people can squabble all they want about the Pokemon franchise. I only take issue with it when they weaponize it to disparage titles that exist in the same space. Dragon Quest Monsters as a series has existed since the 90s, and while many people speculate that it was created to capitalize on the success of Pokemon, the systems that are present within it act as more of an expansion to the mechanics present within Dragon Quest V, which would allow you to recruit some of the enemies and utilize them in battle. It's no secret that Satoshi Tajiri was a Dragon Quest fan and took some inspiration from Dragon Quest V when creating Pokemon. There are several monsters present within Dragon Quest that clearly Pokemon took inspiration from, and it's totally fine. But when you try to say Dragon Quest is copying Pokemon, it just shows your ignorance. Did the Dragon Quest Monsters series try to capitalize on the success of Pokemon by directly making it a monster taming game as opposed to just an RPG with some monster taming elements? Yeah, probably, but the truth is that Dragon Quest Monsters is an expansion of those monster taming systems, not something that's trying to be Pokemon. If anything, Dragon Quest Monsters is far more similar to Shin Megami Megami Tensei, which has its roots in the DDS Megami Tensei games, which released in 1987. Those games have some similarities to Cosmic Soldier, which released in 1984. It does get a little bit tiring having to continually make videos like this about the different monster taming games that I cover. I'm sure my long-term fans feel the same way. However, I just want the masses to understand that not every monster taming game is Pokemon, nor should it try or want to be. Pokemon is its own thing. If you're a Pokemon fan who's participated in this blind hatred for any game that has monster taming, whether or not it's Pokemon inspired, I think you should reflect on yourself and understand why is it that these games make you so angry. Is it because you yourself are self-conscious about certain decisions that the Pokemon company has made? Is it because you deem these games a threat? Or is it because some Pokemon detractors will over-sensationalize these games and try to use them as ammunition against Pokemon? This is definitely a multifaceted issue, and people on both sides of this great Pokemon debate actually make things worse for other monster taming games just trying to exist. Some of the biggest Pokemon, shills as you would call them, will attack these games because they dare to try to stand next to Pokemon, while some people that adamantly hate Pokemon, and that's their entire identity, will use these games to say, hey, this game is so much better than Pokemon. Pokemon shouldn't do that. And then both of these sentiments fuel the other side, making the true victims in these debacles the monster taming games in question. All in all, people just need to chill out and enjoy this game or enjoy the Pokemon DLC or whatever. It's not that deep. Monster taming games can exist, Pokemon can exist, and there's no need to take one down in order to prop up another. You can make comparisons, you could say which game you think is better, but once you start just mob bashing games and just being stupid about it, you kind of just make things worse. But anyways, guys, that's pretty much it. I wanted to get this video out at some point. I actually wrote the script for it a couple weeks ago. Things have definitely quieted down since then, but the first week or two of Dragon Quest release was just another example of this annoying sentiment that seems to pop up. And it's like people don't have enough nuance to understand that you can compare games to Pokemon and talk about, games that are Pokemon-like and games that are not Pokemon-like and stuff like that. And there's a difference between that and trying to compare these indie or smaller budget games to the largest media franchise ever. Granted, Dragon Quest is Square Enix, so it's not a small studio by any means, but you guys get what I'm trying to say here. Anyways, if you want to stay up to date on all things monster taming, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace.